Why do the wisest stay silent? The Schopenhauer secret you need to know. Why do the wisest among us so often choose silence? Why do those who seem to understand life the most feel the least need to explain it? If you look closely, you'll notice something strange about the world. The loudest voices usually belong to those who know the least, while the people who truly grasp the depth of existence are often the quietest in the room. But why? What do they see that others don't? What truth have they uncovered that makes them step back from the endless noise of human conversation? This is where the philosophy of Arthur Schopenhauer comes in, revealing a secret about wisdom, silence, and the hidden power of understanding. By the time we finish this journey, you may start to question every conversation you've ever had and rethink the way you engage with the world. Schopenhauer believed that human life is ruled by an invisible force he called the will, a blind, irrational drive that pushes people to seek pleasure, status, and validation. This will is what makes people argue endlessly, what makes them desperate to be heard, what makes them feel the need to prove themselves in every conversation. But the wisest among us, they escape this trap. They refuse to be controlled by their ego. They do not feel the need to win debates or seek approval. They understand that the moment you engage in a pointless argument, you've already lost because you have allowed someone else to control your energy, to dictate your emotional state. The wisest do not avoid speech because they have nothing to say, but because they understand that most words are wasted on ears that do not truly listen.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
There is a paradox in human nature, one that we often overlook. The more someone talks, the less power their words hold. The more someone argues, the more desperate they seem. But when someone speaks less, when they choose their words carefully, something incredible happens. People listen. Think about the historical figures who truly shaped the world: philosophers, leaders, strategists. Were they the ones constantly explaining themselves, constantly justifying their thoughts? Or were they the ones who spoke rarely, yet when they did, their words carried immense weight? Silence is not emptiness, it is a form of control. It forces others to fill the gap, to wonder what you are thinking, to second-guess themselves. It creates a presence that is far more powerful than any argument could ever be. Schopenhauer believed that human life is ruled by an invisible force he called the will, a blind, irrational drive that pushes people to seek pleasure, status, and validation. This will is what makes people argue endlessly, what makes them desperate to be heard, what makes them feel the need to prove themselves in every conversation. But the wisest among us, they escape this trap. They refuse to be controlled by their ego. They do not feel the need to win debates or seek approval. They understand that the moment you engage in a pointless argument, you've already lost because you have allowed someone else to control your energy, to dictate your emotional state. The wisest do not avoid speech because they have nothing to say, but because they understand that most words are wasted on ears that do not truly listen. But here's where it gets even deeper. Schopenhauer believed that silence is not just a form of wisdom, it is a form of protection. The more you talk, the more you reveal about yourself, your thoughts, your fears, your weaknesses. And the more people know about you, the more they can use that knowledge against you. The truly wise understand that words are like currency. The more you spend them, the less they are worth. Yet if you use them sparingly, deliberately, with precision, each word gains immense power. By mastering the art of selective speech, the wise maintain a level of mystery, an aura of control. They never give away their full hand, never feel the need to explain themselves unnecessarily. This is why the greatest thinkers, the most influential individuals in history, often spoke in riddles, in carefully chosen phrases that left people thinking long after the words had been spoken. But this raises an important question. If silence is so powerful, should we stop speaking altogether? Should we isolate ourselves, refuse to engage, walk away from all conversations? Not exactly. There is a balance, a deeper understanding that Schopenhauer hints at, one that reveals when to speak, when to remain silent, and how to use both as tools to navigate the world. And this is where the real secret begins. The power of restraint. Why saying less makes you stronger. There is an illusion in the way we perceive communication. We have been conditioned to believe that speaking more equates to intelligence, that being vocal proves confidence, that explaining ourselves repeatedly ensures understanding. But what if the opposite were true? What if the real power lies not in how much we say, but in what we choose not to say? Schopenhauer understood something that most people never realize. Restraint is strength. The ability to hold back, to observe, to resist the impulse to argue, explain, or defend oneself is a mark of true wisdom. And yet, it is one of the rarest qualities in the modern world, where everyone is desperate to be heard. Think about the last time you were in a heated discussion. How much of that conversation was truly about the exchange of ideas, and how much of it was about proving a point? Most arguments are not about truth, they are about pride. We don't engage in debates to learn, we engage to win, and in doing so we lose sight of something far more important: the energy we expend in these interactions. Every unnecessary argument drains our mental and emotional reserves. Every moment spent trying to convince someone who refuses to listen is a moment wasted. The wisest among us recognize this and choose their battles carefully. They understand that silence is often the best response, not because they lack the ability to argue, but because they see no value in it. They recognize that most people do not seek wisdom, they seek validation, and wisdom does not submit itself to the approval of the ignorant. There is a kind of quiet dominance that comes from refusing to engage in trivial conversations. When someone provokes you and you do not react, you strip them of their power. When someone expects you to justify yourself and you remain composed, you become untouchable. The more you resist the need to prove yourself, the more control you gain, not just over the conversation, but over yourself. The ability to remain silent in moments of provocation is a rare skill, one that requires deep self-awareness and discipline. It is easy to speak, to react, to throw words into the void without thinking. It is far more difficult to pause, to reflect, to allow silence to do the work for you. And yet, silence is often the most profound response of all. Schopenhauer believed that much of human suffering comes from our inability to detach ourselves from the opinions of others. We are enslaved by the need to be understood, to be accepted, to be validated. But what happens when we let go of that need? What happens when we no longer care whether others agree with us? This is where true freedom begins. The wisest individuals do not seek approval, because they understand that truth does not require validation. They do not argue because they see no need to convince. They do not explain themselves endlessly because they know that those who matter will understand, and those who do not understand are not worth the effort. But this raises an interesting paradox. If silence is so powerful, why do so few people use it? The answer is simple: silence makes people uncomfortable. It forces them to confront their own thoughts, their own insecurities. When we remain silent, we create a space that others feel the need to fill. They scramble to explain, to justify, to keep the noise going, because silence reveals truth, and most people are terrified of the truth. They would rather drown in words than sit in the stillness of their own minds. But this raises an interesting paradox. If silence is so powerful, why do so few people use it? The answer is simple: silence makes people uncomfortable. It forces them to confront their own thoughts, their own insecurities. When we remain silent, we create a space that others feel the need to fill. They scramble to explain, to justify, to keep the noise going because silence reveals truth. And most people are terrified of the truth. They would rather drown in words than sit in the stillness of their own minds. But this leads to an even deeper question: if speaking less makes us stronger, when should we speak at all? If silence is so powerful, does that mean we should avoid communication altogether? The answer lies in understanding the difference between speech that adds value and speech that is merely noise. The wisest individuals do not avoid conversation, they simply ensure that when they engage, their words serve a purpose. They do not speak to fill the air, they speak to illuminate, to clarify, to teach. Every word they choose is deliberate, designed not to impress, but to express. And because their words are rare, they are remembered. This is the secret that most people overlook. We assume that to be noticed, we must be loud. To be respected, we must constantly assert ourselves. That to be understood, we must explain ourselves endlessly. But history has shown us that the most influential figures, the ones who truly left an impact, were not those who spoke the most, they were those who spoke the least, yet said the most. There is an undeniable power in restraint, in knowing when to hold back, in understanding that sometimes the most profound thing you can say is nothing at all. But what happens when silence is misunderstood? What if people take our quietness as weakness, as a lack of confidence? Is there a way to balance wisdom with presence, to command respect without unnecessary words? And more importantly, how can we apply this principle in our own lives to gain not just respect, but true inner peace? This is where the real challenge begins. The silent authority, how speaking less commands more respect. Silence is often mistaken for weakness, for hesitation, for a lack of confidence. But what if silence was actually the greatest display of strength? What if the ability to say nothing at all, to resist the urge to explain, to refrain from unnecessary speech, was the ultimate mark of control? The world rewards those who can command attention, yet the irony is that the ones who demand it the least often receive it the most. There is something about a person who does not feel the need to fill every empty space with words, who speaks only when necessary, that commands a different level of respect. It is not just what they say, it is the fact that they could say more, but choose not to. Schopenhauer understood that true wisdom does not seek validation, nor does it waste energy on those who refuse to listen. He saw that the more we speak, the more we reveal not just our thoughts, but our insecurities, our weaknesses, our fears. The more we explain ourselves, the more we invite others to question us. And the more we argue, the more we lower ourselves to the level of those who live for conflict rather than truth. This is why the wisest individuals are often the most composed. They do not engage in unnecessary debates, because they understand that most people are not looking for truth, they are looking to win. And wisdom does not compete, because truth stands on its own. Imagine walking into a room where everyone is talking over each other, where opinions are being thrown around carelessly, where no one is truly listening. Now imagine a single individual in the corner, observing, thinking, waiting. When they finally speak, the entire room stops to listen. Why? Because their silence created anticipation. Their restraint made their words valuable. Their presence, without the need for constant speech, established an authority that no amount of shouting could achieve. This is the power of silence. It forces others to pay attention, to respect the weight of your words, to recognize that when you do speak, it is because you have something worth saying. But this does not mean silence is always the answer. There are moments when speaking is necessary, when words are required to guide, to teach, to clarify. The key is in knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. The greatest communicators in history were not those who spoke the most, but those who spoke with purpose. They understood that words, when used sparingly, carry far more impact. They knew that true influence is not about dominating a conversation, but about controlling its direction with precision. It is not about proving intelligence through endless talking, but about revealing it in the moments that matter. This is why silence is not just a means of avoiding conflict, it is a tool for shaping perception. When a person speaks less, they create a mystery around themselves. Others begin to wonder what they are thinking, to seek their approval, to value their input more highly. This is why leaders, strategists, and philosophers throughout history have mastered the art of restraint. They knew that by speaking selectively, they could guide the thoughts of others without ever forcing their opinions upon them. They understood that silence can create an aura of wisdom, a sense of presence that words alone cannot achieve. But the question remains, how do we apply this principle in our own lives? How do we balance the need for communication with the power of silence? And how do we ensure that our restraint is seen as strength rather than passivity? The answer lies in mastering not just when to speak, but how to speak. It is about ensuring that every word has weight, that every statement carries intention, that every sentence leaves an impact. It is about recognizing that we do not need to prove ourselves with excessive speech, because true confidence is not in how much we say, but in how certain we are that we do not need to say more. But there is one final piece to this puzzle, one last secret hidden in the philosophy of Schopenhauer that explains why the wisest truly stay silent. Because silence is not just a tool for commanding respect, it is a gateway to something far greater. Something that most people will never realize, simply because they are too busy talking to notice it. The ultimate wisdom, silence as the gateway to mastery. Silence is not just a tool for commanding respect or avoiding unnecessary conflict. It is something far deeper, something that goes beyond strategy, beyond mere perception. It is the gateway to true mastery, not just over speech, but over the mind itself. Schopenhauer understood that wisdom is not just about knowing what to say or when to say it, it is about understanding the space between thoughts, the depth that exists beyond words. The reason the wisest stay silent is not simply because they see the futility of endless conversation, but because they have discovered something far more powerful than speech: the ability to think deeply, to observe without distraction, to exist without the need for external validation. Most people fill their lives with noise, not because they have something meaningful to say, but because they are afraid of what silence might reveal. They fear being alone with their own thoughts, with the weight of existence pressing upon them. They seek comfort in conversation, in endless distractions, in the illusion that communication alone gives life meaning. But the wise understand that true understanding comes from solitude, from the moments where nothing is spoken, where the mind is free to explore without interruption. Silence is not emptiness, it is the space where true thought is cultivated. It is in these moments of quiet that the greatest ideas are born, that the most profound realizations emerge. Schopenhauer believed that the majority of human suffering comes from attachment, the need to be heard, to be understood, to be acknowledged. But what if we could let go of that need? What if we could exist without constantly seeking validation, without feeling the urge to assert our thoughts onto others? This is where true power lies, the ability to remain silent, not because we have nothing to say, but because we do not need to say it. The ability to detach from the noise of the world, to observe without reacting, to understand without the need for acknowledgement. This is why the wisest individuals are often the most peaceful. They are not burdened by the chaos of endless conversation because they have transcended the need for it. But this does not mean withdrawing from the world. On the contrary, it means engaging with it in a way that is deliberate, intentional. It means choosing words carefully, ensuring that when we speak, it is with purpose. It means recognizing that our presence, our silence, Our ability to remain unshaken in the face of noise is itself a form of influence. The greatest wisdom is not just in knowing what to say, it is in knowing when to say nothing at all. And so, we return to the question, why do the wisest stay silent? Because they understand that the deepest truths cannot be spoken, that the most profound realizations exist beyond language. They know that wisdom is not in the noise of the world, but in the quiet spaces between it. And perhaps, in the end, the greatest lesson of all is not in what we say, but in what we choose to leave unsaid.